Thank you so much for having us. We're excited to talk a little bit about the Nature and Neighborhoods Community Choice Grants and share with you some of the lessons we've learned about community engagement and digital use for our toolbox. Next slide, please.
Let me just check in. Everybody can see the screen okay right now? Yes, it's good. Great, thanks. All right.
And I'm joined today by Mike Yun, who was just talking, and we will walk through this presentation together. Next slide, please. So our presentation today will go over just quickly the process of the community choice grants and what makes it a little bit different. Mike will talk about participatory design and really delve into the details there. And then I'll just do a quick review of 4 of the digital tools that we used really successfully in this project. Next slide, please.
Sure.
So in 2019, voters in Greater Portland overwhelmingly supported a $475 million bond to improve water quality, protect fish and wildlife, habitat, and connect people to nature. And that included Nature in Neighborhoods capital grants and a participatory pilot.
Krista, can I pause you just really quick? Sorry, I think we might be a little offset on our slides. Let me start the share over just to make sure I'm doing the right one. Sorry about that, everybody. Screen 2 here. There we go. And now we should be on the 2019 Metro Parks and Nature Bond slide with the 475 million, right? Okay.
Great, thank you. So it included in the Nature Neighborhoods Capital Grants is 1, the Nature Neighborhoods Capital Grants Program, which has multiple rounds of competitive capital grants and has awarded over 5.5 million in the last couple of years. And 2 is this Nature Neighborhoods Community Choice Grants, which uses a community-centered process to create meaningful opportunities to share up to 3 million in capital investments. And we created this community choice grants from 1 bullet point that directed Nature and Neighborhoods Capital Grants program staff to pilot a new participatory grant-making approach. Next slide, please. At the core of the Nature and Neighborhoods Community Choice Grants program is the Program Design and Review Committee. Thanks to the support and leadership and staff, this committee was really empowered to make program decisions and affirm decisions that Metro staff made. Metro staff prepared in advance webinars and resources to reserve as much time as possible in our meetings for discussion and decision making. And the committee members had a variety of backgrounds. They had a shared love of conservation and parks and racial equity. Next slide, please. At the end of the program design phase, the Program Design and Review Committee produced a guidebook and the request for proposals. At the same time, Metro leadership identified flexible funding for engagement and project development, which allowed us to hire a wonderful consultant team of Not Design, Co-Locate, and Multicultural Collaborative that really met the intent of the committee. Metro leadership also determined that the 2023 pilot would occur in Washington County, which led us to convene an incredible coordination team of our partners, Beaverton, Hillsborough, Cornelius, Forest Grove, the parks providers of Tualatin Hills Parks and Recreation District, and Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, as well as Clean Water Services. For the second round of this participatory program starting in 2025, we just started, Metro leadership recommended that the grants focus on Metro's District 2, east of the Willamette River, which includes the cities of Gladstone, Johnson City, Milwaukee, Oregon City, unincorporated parks of Clackamas County, and the parks provider of North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District. So many of the portions of the participatory process that we share with you today are really collaborative ideas and insights from all of those groups. As I mentioned, the participatory process was developed by the committee and Metro staff to interpret the purpose and criteria of the Parks and Nature Bond. This framework really needed to adhere to the legal and financial constraints, project development best practices, which Mike will talk about later, and respect staff capacity and autonomy of the local jurisdictions. So the participatory process follows some of the principal milestones of a typical participatory budgeting process due to the advocacy of participatory budgeting Oregon, including, like I was saying, the community-led program design by our program design and review committee, community-generated ideas, which in this graphic is number 1, collaborative project development, number 2 and 4, and community voting to recommend project funding in 3 and 6. Next slide, please. The community choice grants begin with idea collection, which provides in-person and digital opportunities for the community to share their ideas for what types of projects should be created. It also includes general education on the types of projects that might be eligible or feasible for $250,000, the process, the funding, and recruiting participants in subsequent phases. So as you can see from this slide, the digital platform is at that highlighted address, and this is currently live for our Clackamas County round. And so if any of you do work or live or play in Clackamas County, we encourage you to submit your idea for a park or natural space. In addition to the digital platform, the idea collection phase includes 3 in-person idea generating workshops and tabling. We just had one this weekend in Gladstone. And in our process in Washington County during this idea collection phase, we were pleased to have 118 project ideas submitted with over 100 survey responses. Next slide, please. Project development is really where ideas submitted during the idea collection phase are developed into complete project proposals, and Mike will talk in a lot more detail about this phase. In overview, project development happens through 6 facilitated design workshops collaboratively with park owners, landscape architects, and other design experts and community members in 2 phases. One is the idea refinement, and the second is the proposal refinement. Through these facilitated workshops and several one-on-one design meetings with partners, the project team creates a conceptual illustration and then creates a scope and budget, including contingency, and a schematic site design. In the first round in Washington County, the community voted then on the conceptual illustrations in between these 2 phases, and of 45 project ideas, chose 28 projects to move forward into the next phase of proposal refinement. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, through these facilitated design workshops, the project team creates a scope, budget, and schematic design for the community to choose during the community vote phase. So after the projects were fully developed, the community voted to choose which of those 26 projects should be funded. And we were really pleased in our first round to have over 1,600 folks come out to vote on projects and have 89% of those people be from communities of focus in District 4 in Washington County. Using the results of the vote, the Program Design and Review Committee then recommended 15 projects for funding to our Metro Council, who ultimately approved that $2.3 million in grant awards. And these projects are now with their respective Washington County jurisdictions for final design and construction, which is really exciting. Next slide, please. I'm also going to share more about how we reached community. Participatory grant making and participatory budgeting really are not new concepts. They're rooted in community organizing. On the spectrum of public participation, it aims to move the engagement of community from informing to involving and then deferring to community. So therefore, the public engagement phase was intentionally designed through a year of scoping and pre-planning the project, including research, informational interviews and workshops, applying lessons learned, joining an international community of practice, which was super cool all around Africa and Europe and Eastern United States, to really come up with an idea of how this should move forward. We then built upon that expertise and knowledge of our Washington County partners and now our Clackamas County partners and our consultant team applied the racial equity framework tool at Metro, engagement goals, and audience mapping. So for us, creating accents was essential. We recognize that not everyone has leisure time to attend events outside of their daily schedules. We knew that we needed to meet community where they are. So in Washington County, this included events all throughout Washington County, included workshops at libraries and Central Cultural Community Center. It included tabling at Dia de los Niños, Dia de los Muertos, Eid al-Fitr, as well as farmers markets and Hillsborough Hops games. It meant connecting with local businesses and offering gift cards to local restaurants, markets, and treat shops as part of our raffle incentive workshops. It also included language equity. All of our materials were produced and shared bilingually. Interpretation was offered at all of our events with native speaker Metro employees when possible. And we were able to carry all of these concepts through our digital platforms, events we held at community spaces like libraries, recreation, and community centers, tabling on-site project posters at the parks and mailers. Next slide, please. Our consultant co-locate also spearheaded the community leaders program called the Community Design Advocates. We are so thankful and grateful to the Beaverton Black Parent Union, Brandon Culbertson and Patricia Kepler for sharing their expertise with us. These community leaders were offered stipends and were asked to share their lived experience, conduct outreach to their community, and offer suggestions for materials and workshop design, as well as community events. And we held specific workshops for the Soul Stroll for the Beaverton Black Parent Union, and 2 workshops specifically for the urban indigenous community in Washington County. We learned from their expertise, including traditional ecological knowledge like the pine needle and mushroom tea that Brandon is serving in this photo. Next slide, please. Patricia Kepler, one of our community design advocates, was really essential in helping make our process more accessible. Patricia herself is blind. There were some huge learning moments for our team, as most materials and events are inaccessible to folks with vision impairments and other disabilities. So with Patricia's guidance, we now have tools that we use in Washington County, used in Washington County and used in Clackamas County, including tactile and audio components to all our workshops, accessibility workshop website and event guide that is available on tablets with headsets at events and available beforehand if folks want to orient. We offered screen reader compatible and Braille materials, as well as QR codes on boards. And prior to the workshop starting, we provided additional training for facilitators on how to interact with care and connect participants with the resources they needed. And now I'll pass it over to Mike to talk about the design process.
Thank you so much, Krista, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thank you for having us. I just wanted to focus a little bit on our methodologies for facilitating, the ideation and project development phases, because I know that's a huge question from folks in design. As you all know, taking one project through 3 concepts, engaging community equitably and advancing that to a schematic level is a lot of work just for one project. And as Krista mentioned, we had over 118 ideas submitted. And as we were approaching this, we really didn't know. It was an unknown number of projects that we were going to be having to carry forward. So one of the things that we really focused on was thinking about this as an emergent process and focusing on things that were scalable, or processes that would be scalable to accommodate all of the community ideations. So that, again, was a central challenge. And I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit of the specific tools that we used in the materials. So I know Krista showed this photo earlier, but I just wanted to unpack this a little bit for folks. So in the beginning, the first phase is idea generation. And as you're thinking about that in an architectural project, you know, we've all got training and background and come into that project with a lot of pre-existing knowledge. For this work, we wanted to focus on, as Krista mentioned, universal access. So making sure that people, and especially those that have been historically sidelined or left out or don't feel comfortable with governmental processes, were invited in and felt like they wanted to engage with this work. So we really thought about idea generation as play, as kind of an open-ended, facilitated, creative workshop with community. What you're looking at here is in the middle, a bunch of modeling materials that people, including kids, as you see in this photo, would use to assemble 3D models of just thoughts or ideas for nature and neighborhoods. And on the right-hand side, you see our partner in this, Sophia from Colocate, helping to facilitate documenting an idea through a narrative form. Again, just like a focus on tactile materials was really essential to make sure people of all abilities were able to engage in this. And this is just an example of what some of those submitted idea forms actually looked like. So as you can see on the left, when people develop models, we had a camera where we could just print the images immediately, and we tape those on to the idea submission forms. Individuals would draw images and then narrate their own ideas. As you can see on the right, some of the ideas were just narrative. Some of them were accompanied by drawings that people had done outside of the workshops. There's a wide range. We then had to figure out a way to keep track of these ideas. I know this isn't the most exciting graphic, but this is actually a really important part of the process, in that, of course, we're dealing with a magnitude of information that we have to keep organized. So the next thing that we did after we got all of those ideas was basically set up a database that tracked the name of the idea, whether or not it was in an equity focal area, where it was located, if it did have a location, because we had a lot of ideas that just it didn't have a location in the beginning, how the individual described it. Then we extracted themes from those ideas, and then we tried to start the process of matchmaking. So identify which agencies this may be relevant to. So if it was in the city of Hillsborough, for example, that would likely be a City of Hillsborough project. Maybe it's a Washington County project. Maybe it's Clean Water Services. So that's what you're seeing over there on the right as partners. And then we went through a process of vetting these ideas with Metro and with partners to make sure that, one, they were compatible with the program needs, and two, that they would align with something that our partners saw as feasible, because of course they would be the owners of these projects in the end. Next, we took these ideas and we needed to facilitate the next stage. So taking just that raw nascent idea, sometimes these were those like very dreamy, very kind of ambiguous ideas. Sometimes they're very specific, as you're saying on the right with Nature Play in Hillsborough. And for the first round of community design workshops, we just needed more input from community about, like, do you think this idea is fun? And then what other elements might we add to it? How can we define it? How can we take it and advance it into an actual project? So on the left, you're seeing bilingual descriptions of the idea, and then icons and lists of some of our preliminary thoughts on what elements of this project would be. I'll read this out because I'm sure it's small for you all, but like woodland and forest plantings, swings, log play elements, benches, turtle or amphibian pond, things like this. And then on the right, we had an open-ended collage board, which people interacted with at our workshop. So this is a photo of me engaging here and some other members of our team in the back, but just talking people through some of the ways to interact with these collage boards and unpacking some of the ideas that they were presented with. Because again, we had initially 118 ideas. I think many of those ended up in these community design workshops. I can't remember the exact threshold, but it was upwards of 50 that were being reviewed and advanced by community here. This is another example of one of those workshops with our partners from the city of Hillsborough, talking to folks, and you can see people making annotations on these boards and notes. And this was the kind of full set of results that we got from that first set of workshops. I think this is 50 boards, and you can see all of this luxurious qualitative information here that helped us advance these projects forward. And then just zooming in a little bit, we had prepared all of these stickers. So these are all just like stickers or collage materials that people had a lot of fun kind of making and assembling these collages and making notes here. I think you can see on the bottom right, it says Calapooya specific art educational information. This was for an idea that was related to a story walk. And they also had ways to vote on the amenities or put emoji stickers or things like that on these description boards. Additionally, an important part of scaling this and making this equitable was trying to figure out how do we represent these ideas. Some individuals were very talented in their sketches and had really amazing graphics, and other folks wanted nothing to do with that. They just had a narrative description, and that was that. So as you know, as designers, the way that things are represented is very impactful for how people perceive them. So we worked with Metro to land on using Adobe Firefly as a tool to scale our concept level graphic representation of some of these ideas. Now, keep in mind, this was 2 years ago, but the reason why we landed on Adobe Firefly is it's trained on stock imagery, so it doesn't contain the ethical issues that came along with something like Midjourney, which is trained on all imagery online, for example. So that was a happy medium for us. And then we engaged people in the community to tell us which style that they felt most attracted to. And actually people picked the far left one, the color pencil, which I thought was really interesting. So we then went into the next round of community design workshops with another advanced set of materials. So you can see the Firefly rendering up at the top. Then we took the information that was on those collage boards and we turned it into these quotes that you can see being called out of that graphic. We developed context maps using ArcGIS, and then we developed site scale maps, again, using an automated process in ArcGIS. Here's like the full suite of images just so that you can see, and this is not all of them, but this is a subset of about 15 of the 50 that we made. And again, one of the nice things about this is all the projects had the same style of representation. These aren't really specific to the actual elements in the project. I mean, some of them are if it was nature play, for example, or habitat. But really the point was making this feel fun for people to engage and to interact with. If it was just a website for PV Stanford voting that was just full of narrative and a context map, it would be a lot less enticing for people to look through. So we wanted to spark curiosity as we were going through this. Here's an example of the community design workshops. Keeping an eye on time here just to make sure we're tracking. Another element of this is figuring out cost. And so that was something that was a big question as you know, we have a specific limitation to what we can fund through nature and neighborhoods. So how do we make sure that we're ideating with folks in a direction that will be fitting to the amount of funding we'll eventually have? So we worked with our partners. This is Gary Keck with THPRD, and he was really instrumental in helping us understand what their cost understanding was for many of the different elements that we were proposing. For example, hard or soft surface trails, community gardens. We reviewed a lot of their recent projects with them to understand what they were spending on these elements, and then developed essentially a menu that covered all of the most common cost items that we came about in these ideas. And we brought those to these workshops. And as you can see, there's some chips here on the table. And those were about, $10,000 worth of of, we call them park points, so 10,000 park points, and we gave every project the appropriate amount of chips. It would be 25 chips, and you could move those around according to the elements that you wanted. This is Sophia facilitating a Indigenous community specific design workshop. And I should note, we had many ideas come out of this. I think upwards of 14 ideas came out of this, and it did result in several funded projects in the end, which was just amazing. This is an idea of how we then took the output of those workshops and turned it into just this kind of concept, or SD level site plan, essentially. And again, keep in mind, we had about 28 of these that we were advancing. And then this is an illustration of what we brought to that final project expo, where people came and actually were voting on those final projects. This had that concept render, it had the site plan, it had the project summary, and it had a cost associated with it. And this is the full set of projects that made it into that final vote. And in the end, we had 14 or 15, 14, Krista, I'm kind of looking, 14 final projects distributed all across the district. And really, we were happy to see that many of them were in those original equity focus areas that we had defined in the beginning. So all in all, we were really excited to see how this all played out in the end. And with that, I'll pass it back to Krista.
Great, thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about 4 of the digital tools that we use to help make this happen. And the mural board is an online tool that we used with our program design and review committee at the very beginning. So that time period between 2022 and 2023. But it was one of the ways that we could really focus our review committee on discussion during the meeting. So we made webinars using Zoom, just recording ourselves, giving presentations to no one, and produced resources like memos and reports before meeting times to really reserve as much of that meeting time for discussion and decision making. And so you'll see on this mural board that we shared some important resources, such as the racial equity reflective questions from Metro's racial equity framework to help inform some of those decisions. And we also allowed the committee to share notes, comments, feedback, and resources to inform those program decisions. And then we also have a check mark when a decision has been made. Check, this is the decision, and then that decision could then go into the final guidebook that really is the document that guides this whole process. And I'll also mention that in mural board, you can also vote within the platform, which was really helpful. Next slide, please. So Metro applied a targeted universalism approach to our community outreach. Metro Council had defined equity focus areas as places of special interest. And you'll see the website there highlighted of the equity focus areas. These equity focus areas were used to focus the community choice grants direct outreach and communication efforts while really maintaining a broad engagement strategy. So Metro developed in ArcGIS this equity focus area with 3 layers of data, and our project added 2 layers of additional data from the DEI grant evaluation tool. And so in total, it was percent people of color, percent 5-year change in people of color, percent limited English proficiency, percent low income, and percent voter turnout. Then in addition, we layered on additional tool that was made by Knot Studio, this Community Vulnerability Index. The results of this Community Vulnerability Index, it shows where to focus community organizing efforts with community-based organizations and event locations. So this particular one that's shown on the slide This index uses a wider variety of data sources, so it includes the American Community Survey, NHD's Places data, and custom products created for this particular project that were organized into three themes: race and ethnicity, socioeconomic vulnerability, and environmental benefits and burdens. We took both of these resources and applied this targeted universalism approach by producing and mailing out 55,000 bilingual direct mailers in our Washington County project to every address in these equity focus areas. And we really know that in the age of spam email and texts and paid social media posts, direct mail really offers direct access to the community. And we just sent a similar amount of mailers out to Clackamas County, and we saw a huge bump even over the last week in the number of ideas submitted through our digital platform because of those mailers. Next slide, please. So Metro also produced an ArcGIS hub in 2025 for the Clackamas County round. Knott and Metro collaborated to create an ArcGIS experience builder for the 2023 round in Washington County. Both of those platforms allow for idea submission, upvotes for popular projects, and feedback all to happen in one place. They're both mobile and desktop friendly. They allow for site descriptions and locations, as you see here on this map. And I'll say again, there's the link there to the idea collection platform. And if you have an idea for Parks and Naturals in Clackamas County, please submit an idea. Next slide, please. Finally, I wanted to talk a little bit about PB Stanford. It is a participatory budgeting standard for platform to be used for voting in participatory budgeting projects. It's free to use, and the support actually comes from PhD students at Stanford University. And it is really great because it allows you to have a bilingual ballot, and it has several languages that it is available to use. It allows us to upload evocative images for engagement and equity between the projects. And it also allows both online and in person through tablets at community spaces, at tabling, at workshops. At the workshop that we had this weekend in Gladstone, we had a couple of tablets set up with keyboards, and folks could just input their idea right there onto this onto the platform. Sorry, that's the idea collection platform, but the same idea will be true when we get to the voting stage in Clackamas County. And again, it's mobile and screen reader compatible. So next slide, please. Just with that, I just want to give a big shout out to our consultant team. JLA helped us a lot with our public engagement through the Program Design and Review Committee in that 2022-2023 time period. And then, of course, our partners who have been our partners since 2023 for our Washington County partner, but we're so happy to have them again for our 2025 round in Clackamas, Knott Studio, Co-Locate, and Multicultural Collaborative. Next slide, please. We really couldn't have done the Washington County round without our Washington County partners. They really added so much richness and very community specific information that made this project a success. So big shout out to THPRD, Forest Grove, Cornelius, Beaverton, Tualatin Soil and Water Conservation District, Hillsborough, and Clean Water Services. Next slide, please. And thanks to the Metro team. So Gabrielle and I lead this program, but we are supported by many of our teammates at Metro, whether they're people who work in community engagement or communications or administrative staff or our support staff from our leadership. It really makes a huge difference. And Gabrielle is also on the call today. Next slide, please. just thank you so much. We're open to any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Krista and Michael. That's an amazing body of work that's still in the middle of the process. The thought to put the project together from the RFP perspective, and then the program design review committee that to actually develop the program itself, and then the execution and the process to go through and focus in Washington County and now Clackamas. It's this was great. I didn't know that much about it, so I'm happy to have been part of this, to see this. We have room in the chats for people to introduce their questions. Kristen, Michael are here, and Gabrielle, I guess you said, is also if something comes up, if there's a reference in that. But so with, I guess one thing because I will have to fill the airtime with my voice. Clackamas County is next. And so you're still in the planning phase. Is there, what's the duration? What's the full run out of this program in terms of the other counties and outreach areas, and then the timeline?
So the pilot round was really a pilot. We were seeing whether we could take these participatory budgeting principles and create a participatory design process. It worked out really well, which is why we were given the opportunity to do a second round in Clackamas County. As of now, you may know Metro has some shortfalls in funding right now. So we're really excited to have this funding to do the work in Clackamas County over the next 15 months. And then after that, we're not sure what the future is of the program.
I guess as questions are forming, I'll elicit any questions from the UDP XCOM as well. But these are the number of projects that are identified, the distillation, the sort of community engagement to help kind of bring things down to tangible opportunities. In terms of the implementation of these, and I'll ask dumb questions because I don't know, like, is there a forecast of like, how is it up to the local communities to prioritize these to then follow up with Metro in terms of like next steps, or how do things get implemented, I guess, or what could be a plan for that?
So the ones that go through this process, like Michael was saying, there were 28 projects that got developed fully with a schematic design, site design, as well as budget and a conceptual illustration. And of those 28 projects, the community voted on 15 projects. The committee then took those 15 recommended projects and went to the Metro Council for grant funding. And once those 15 projects were funded, then we're in the middle of like contracts and IGAs to implement those projects and get the funding to the jurisdictions who will ultimately own and maintain them. And then I will say, 15 were ranked the highest, but within that 28, that group of 28 projects, there were more than 15 wonderful projects. And so a couple of those projects actually have come back for Nature and Neighborhoods capital grants funding and been successful. And so they're being funded through this secondary set of funding.
Wow, it would be great to see those realized for sure. We do have a question from Aaron. The use of digital resources paired with hands-on engagement in this effort is so rich and so cool. Curious to hear how much fine-tuning, iterating was needed to dial in the AI-generated renderings. So from the vision to actually the consistent imagery that came about it, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. That's a great question, Aaron. Thanks. It did take a little bit of, I guess they would call it prompt crafting, is what you're doing, right, with those AIs. So it's trying to figure out like how to get it to respond to you in the way that you're expecting. And our team here did a lot of work on that. I think out of those final images that you see, we had 3 to 6 other auxiliary images that we had as options when we're reviewing it. So there was definitely a range of result, but again, it's like a scalable approach that allowed us to test it out in that way, which I think, again, was appropriate for this specific type of work. We always looked at it through the lens of we're using this to help empower community ideas and to advance equity. So that was really the framework for it. And it got kind of fun. I mean, I'd imagine, and we're going to find out again with this new round, but I'd imagine the tools have advanced already. Again, this was like 2 years ago when we were doing this, and they've really come a long way. So I'm excited to see how those tools respond as we're using it this round.
Sort of a living process as things evolve with time and technology, I suppose.
Yeah, I keep wondering, like, in 10 or 20 years from now, like, will it be very identifiable of like exactly the era of AI that those were created? You know, they've got such a specific character to them. It's definitely going to change.
Great. Curious to see if anyone has any more questions. Did you, so far in the process, so you've completed a round in Washington County, and I guess you're in the middle of kicking off the Clackamas County. Are there, I guess the question I have, are there any lessons learned or things that you learned from the process from Washington County that you already know you're going to be looking at and implementing in the next round in Clackamas?
Yes, we have lots of things. We learned a lot that first round. I mean, it was just, between Mike and Gabrielle and myself and some of the other core team members, we were constantly problem solving. We were using all of our creative wits to deal with some of the, like Mike said, some of the design issues from my perspective, some of the community engagement issues. And from Gabrielle helped a lot with some of the digital tools. So from her perspective, some of those digital tools, there was just so much that we learned, and especially about participatory budgeting or participatory design. Like, what is it and how does it work? It was like I mentioned just really quickly, I joined an international community of practice for participatory grant making across the world. And I just learned an immense amount from those folks on how differently these projects are implemented across the world. So that's a very broad description. Maybe Mike or Gabrielle, do you want to jump in with some specifics of things that we've changed?
Gabrielle, I'll
go
let
ahead,
you go.
Mike.
I just wanted to add one thing really quickly, which is I have never in my career had an experience where I was able to do kind of the same project a second time to go through it, and so that has been extremely cool because you feel like, yeah, Jeremy, you've like learned so much. You're kind of a well-oiled machine as you're going back there. So just from that perspective, it's really an exciting opportunity to do it again. So Gabrielle, I'll pass it to you for some more detail.
Yeah, I think I would just take a moment to mention the sort of process by which we selected the communities that we were working in, and the impact that had on the program, especially as going into a second round. Like Krista mentioned, I mean, the decision was ultimately made by Metro leadership, but the decision on where to base our process was based on sort of this overlapping Venn diagram of like partner capacity and community need. And Washington County presented us this really best case scenario of really strong partners and also communities within those larger jurisdictions that had a lot of park and natural space needs. So we're working with sort of the best case scenario to help us identify what would be the problems, what would be the challenges. And that was super helpful, not only to just to get us off the ground in that first round, but now we're in Clackamas County where there isn't the jurisdictional capacity, there isn't the strong jurisdictional partners or the strong like community-based organizations that exist in Washington County. But our experience in the previous round allows us to sort of overcome some of those challenges. We know what's required. We know where extra support is going to be needed. We know how to work in sort of deep in community to make up some of those shortcomings because we got all that great knowledge and those great experiences working in Washington County.
Oh, Jeremy,
Sorry,
I
that's
can't hear
okay.
you. Okay.
Nope, I was off. I realize it.
Right.
There's a couple more questions. There were so many other cool efforts at Metro right now. I recently learned of the Cooling Corridor Study. Does Nature Neighborhoods program coordinate with other Metro programs or staff to align goals?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we have lots of cool projects going on, and yes, we try our best to coordinate. So Gabriella and I are part of a community investments team. So we have a variety of sponsorships and grants program that we manage. And we meet regularly with the other folks who do grants and other investment projects across Metro. We also have the opportunity to work with our planning and development department. So because we're working in capital projects, we do a lot of coordination with our planning and development department. And then also, because this is such a rich community engagement process, we join a group called the Community Relations Group on a regular basis to share information and learn from them as well.
A lot of cross-pollination and yeah, feeding off of other inputs. This is an interesting one. It was a question I also thought was interesting to me. Could you speak a little bit more about the process of winnowing or distilling down the large amounts of input into really concise ideas to bring back for the second round of voting? What was that? This seemed like just a plethora of ideas, and you mentioned the numbers. How did you get down to the second round?
Yeah, totally. I'd be happy to start that response, and Chris or Gabrielle, if you want to add anything, please do. I think we really had the perspective of wanting to support community throughout all of this. So we really wanted it to be inclusive and to find reasons to move ideas forward. So that was one of the important frameworks. We weren't trying to like call it all out into just a distinct number that were more easy to manage. If we found an idea that wasn't quite in line with the goals of the program or didn't have a home, one, we tried to figure out ways that we could accommodate it or try to fit it in or merge it with another idea that would be more in line with the program. And then we did a kind of extensive amount of matchmaking. So we went back and we facilitated meetings at every stage with those partner groups where we went through like the full list and matched them with basically their CIP or their ongoing planning efforts to try to identify where things might be possible and to kind of talk from that perspective in a way as an advocate for the community voice. So in those meetings, trying to, yes, find a way to make it work. So with that said, there were still some ideas that were kind of too far out there or just not in line with the program that didn't make it through. But I guess that would be my initial response to that process. And there's definitely kind of more details we could get into with the specific criteria that we looked at for each one. And I don't know, Chris or Gabrielle, if you want to talk to some of that at all.
Yeah, happily. So it sounds a bit trite, but all capital letters collaboration, especially with our jurisdictional partners. It took a lot of work, and like Mike says, we really had a philosophy that I refer to consistently as getting to yes. I mean, a lot of sort of these projects, everyone's looking for the no's, reasons to stop, and we were always willing to float an idea that was almost there to the next stage because we could imagine a way in which we could get to yes. And that actually turned out to be a great philosophy because we ended up funding some projects that that were not on CIP lists originally or were not project types that our jurisdictional partners had done before. We got a lot of like, we've always kind of wanted to do this, but never really were able to, and this gave us an opportunity and free resources for our partners to work with them to do that. That said, like Krista mentioned, we did a ton of research in collaboration with other practitioners around the world at the beginning of this project. And one of the things we really learned is that participatory processes are a huge burden on staff. Because there's so much collaboration, because these are usually sort of ad hoc and they require jurisdictional partners and agency partners to work kind of on their own time to do these really deep dive development work, and compressing was normally a multi-year development process into a couple of months. That we were really cognizant that we needed to focus our energy on the most popular and the most feasible projects. Now, some of that is just our funding source being a general obligation bond was a bit limited. We can only fund capital projects. So, of our 118 project ideas, a lot of them were programming, which, was not an eligible expense. But some of those were like, we want to do this regular gathering for Indigenous practice in this park. So we worked with our partners to create a gathering space, turning a programming project into a capital project. And then, like Mike said, combining, recombining, splitting off projects just to find the best mix that worked for our partners, that worked for community, and that were ultimately feasible given our sort of like limitations and restrictions.
Thank you. There's a couple more questions, and I think, well, we got about 8 minutes left, so we'll see how this plays out. Thank you all for your time. Again, this was a great presentation. I think Fiona followed up. Can nature and neighborhood grants support longer-term scientific database studies by communities, for example, species population or ecosystem health? Is there a venue that, or maybe not necessarily community associated, but more data and scientific based studies?
And we have a separately funded program called the Nature and Neighborhoods Restoration and Community Stewardship Grants that may be able to fund studies, but they're really more interested in getting the community invested in stewardship of our natural lands. So maybe through that program, but like Gabrielle said, this is a capital grants program, and so it can't be funded through this particular program.
Thank you. And Brian has, I think we sort of touched on it, but maybe there's a way to package up this question. Could you give us an overall picture of the scope of the whole program and time frame for implementing projects that will be funded by the bond? I know you mentioned there are budgeting challenges that are kind of at a threshold that create or maybe take away opportunities, but is there a vision for a larger schedule and implementation process?
So I'm not, just ask another question if I don't quite answer it. But so the bond funds capital investments. So our funding shortfall is really on operating funds right now. So we still have our bond funding, our bond funded programs are going strong. This particular program, the Community Choice Grants, because it has such a robust community engagement and project development piece of it, that is funded through operating funds, and then the dollars that are allocated, as well as some of the more technical pieces of this project, are funded by the bond. So that's a little wonky, but there you go. And in terms of the whole Metro program, we have $40 million to allocate for the Nature and Neighborhoods Capital Grants program. The bond was passed in 2019. There's different estimates of when we will have the funding spent down for the capital grants program. But all of the grant funding will be allocated by 2030 approximately. And it has 5 years after being allocated to have the project completed. So 2035 is an estimate of when we expect all of the $40 million worth of projects to be awarded, contracted, and constructed.
I think that hit the mark. Thank you for that. Well, we got 3 minutes left. I don't know if there's any closing statements, Aaron, that you have, but I think I don't see any more questions unless something pops up. I know that you all have provided your emails in the chat. So if there's follow-up questions, it's safe to assume that people can contact you directly for more specific or afterthoughts. What a fantastic program. I think it was well presented. It was easy to follow along, and there was so much to be learned in just this 40 minutes that I look forward to seeing the outcomes in Clackamas County, and hopefully kind of peeking into the process as well. So thank you so much, Aaron. It looks like, I don't know if you want to add anything or not.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to Krista and Mike and Gabrielle for being here today to present and share all of this amazing content to the group. And thank you to all of our attendees this afternoon for carving out time in your day to be here. I don't recall off the top of my head what our June topic is.
Got it.
Jeremy,
So
do you?
June,
you've
we have
got it.
Portland Solutions coming. Portland Solutions is coming to talk about the mayor's houselessness plan. And then in July, it's not on our website yet. I promise I will get it up there soon with Kathy. We're gonna have full stack modular, talking about modular construction. So should be a good next couple months. Hope you get registered. Yeah.
I also
Awesome.
wanted
Thanks,
to
all.
point out that you put it in there earlier, but the session is eligible for AICP credits. And that's it. The number is in the chat right now.
Thank you all.
Alrighty. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much for having us. Thanks for the time.
Yeah,
Thanks, Michael.
thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.